Hello, good morning. Welcome to all participants on this call. I guess I should also say good evening, as we have a participant from a lot of geographies, from Latin America to New Zealand. So I hope you guys have had some coffee either this morning or have some coffee ready at hand to keep you awake. My name is François Fevet. I'm from Philips Medical Field Marketing Team here in Böblingen, Germany, and I will be your moderator for today. The title of our webinar is Implementing an AED Program in Your School. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. I hope you will enjoy it and you will find answers to some of the questions you may have today. Just a quick word. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. But you are able from now on to use the Q&A screen at the bottom of your screen and to type in any questions you may have, and that I will be presenting to the moderator, to the speaker at the end. So I'm very happy to introduce now today's guest speaker. Dr. Andy Lockie is the Honorary Secretary of the UK Resuscitation Council, and is also a consultant at the A&E department of the Royal Calderdale Hospital in England. So, without further ado, Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francois. Thank you to you and also to Philips for enabling me to give this webinar today. I'm very, very privileged to be able to talk to you all. This is an incredibly important topic, as I'm sure you are all aware. As will be mentioned as I progress through this webinar, this isn't just about implementing training for children. This is about saving lives. And the aim of this is that hopefully you will go away enthused to make a change and to make a difference in your own institutions, and then hopefully you too can become one of these lifesavers. It's something that's very simple to set up, but it does just need an advocate. It needs somebody to get the ball rolling, somebody to start things off, and hopefully that's going to be you. So just a little bit about myself before I start. As Francois has already said, I'm the Honorary Secretary of the Resuscitation Council. I also work with the European Resuscitation Council, and over the last 2 years in the UK, I've been leading a campaign to try and get CPR and AED training onto the school's curriculum. My day job is that I'm a consultant in emergency medicine and have been doing that for the last 12 years at Calderdale Royal Hospital, which is based in Halifax in the north of England. So, today, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about the 1, 2, 3 approach to implementing an AED program in your school and how easy it will be to achieve. So what do we mean? Well, the first step that I'll be talking about is that you need to activate interest. More details obviously later. The second step is that you need to engage with sponsors. And then finally, the third step is that you need to deliver the training. And then hopefully, with this 3-step approach, you can then get AED training going in your very own institutions.
So at this stage, we just would like to ask for your opinion and have a very quick poll. You see on this slide, we would like to know if you already have an AED, if you're considering buying an AED in the future, or if you don't currently intend to install the AED. So you can choose your answer and submit your answer now. Thank you. And Laura will just look at your results and push the result slides in a moment. So a number of you have an AED in your premises, but you may want to know how to make sure that a lot of people are trained onto it. So now back to Andy.
That's really encouraging. I'm very happy to see that outcome. And certainly, having an AED on your premises is the first start. And actually, those of you who already have an AED have probably overcome one of the biggest hurdles to implementing training. Those of you who are considering buying AEDs, I'll go into this in a little bit more detail later, but you're also in a very good position because obviously there's the enthusiasm to do something, and obviously I'm very, very happy to see that there is 0% who don't intend to install AEDs. So hopefully I've got an audience who is already won over to the concept of AED training. So let's see what we're going to be doing. These are my objectives for the next half an hour. I intend to cover all of these aspects. So to start with, really I'd just like to give you a bit of background into the extent of the problem that means that having an AED in schools is an essential requirement. Sudden cardiac death. This is what we're really talking about. Sudden cardiac death, otherwise known as cardiac arrest, it's basically where the heart suddenly stops. And it can be due to a multitude of reasons, but what we're hoping is that somebody has a sudden cardiac death due to an electrical problem in their heart, because these are the people that we can do something about that. We can actually bring them back from the brink and actually bring them back to a full and active life. Is it a problem? Well, it certainly is. Certainly in the UK, we know that there are 30,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests every year that are attended by the emergency services. Probably twice that number occur, but only 30,000 of them are attended by the paramedics, by the ambulance services. And that's a huge number. We know that over half of them are witnessed by bystanders and also by family members. But we also know that survival is abysmal. At best in the UK at the moment, survival rates are about 10.7%. So if you work out some simple mathematics, that equates to approximately 27,000 people who are dying every year from sudden cardiac death. Now compare that with other very widely publicized conditions such as breast cancer and road traffic accidents. There are large numbers of people dying through those conditions, but you'll note that the numbers are quite small compared with sudden cardiac death. And yet why is it that cardiac arrest doesn't get the same element of publicity and the same element of resources that are pumped into it to try and address this really important health issue? Maybe it's because a lot of people equate sudden cardiac death with people like this lovely gentleman whose photo was on the internet a few months ago. He was the oldest man in the world from Japan, 116 years old, and sadly died. And a lot of people think and equate sudden cardiac death with people at the extremes of age. But we know that that isn't always the case. Sudden cardiac death is not discriminatory. It doesn't just affect one age demographic. And probably the best example of this was when the footballer Fabrice Muamba collapsed on the pitch at Tottenham Hotspur last year. And he had a cardiac arrest, he had immediate CPR and defibrillation as well on the pitch additionally. And he survived because he had optimal treatment. Now this is a man who is very fit, very healthy, at the prime of his life, and yet this horrible condition affected him as well. So this is why it's so important. We want to be able to retrieve people like Fabrice Muamba, but also people of all ages who still have an active part to play in life and who have a good reason to continue going. So that's the reason why we're talking about this today. So what are the solutions to this? I'm going to show you now a graphic that in the medical world is very well known. It's known as the chain of survival. And essentially, these are 4 critical elements that need to be achieved to be able to resuscitate somebody fully. And you'll notice that the 4 elements start with early recognition and call for help. That's vital. You can't do things on your own, and you need to be calling for help if somebody collapses. But critical to this is the next link, which is early CPR. Unless somebody is collapsing right next to a defibrillator, then they need CPR immediately. In tandem with this, they need early defibrillation, And then once they've been successfully resuscitated, they need the high standards of post-resuscitation care that are available now in most hospitals. And certainly as an emergency department consultant, I'm reliant on people having achieved those first three links to bring me somebody that I can then do all the manner of wonderful things that we can do in hospital. But without those first three links, I'm not going to be able to achieve anything. Out of those four interventions, the ones that are proven to have the most effect are CPR and defibrillation. As I mentioned, if you don't collapse next to a defibrillator, we know that for every minute that passes without CPR, a person's survival will decrease by up to 10% every minute. Now in the UK we have a target time for ambulances to arrive to people by 8 minutes. So you can already imagine that if somebody has not had CPR performed in those 8 minutes, their chances of survival are minimal. So how can we improve those chances of survival? Well, there's two interventions we can do. Firstly, we can train everybody to do CPR, because we know that if CPR is ongoing, the deterioration is reduced to only 2 to 3% every minute. So CPR buys extra time until a defibrillator arrives. But the important aspect is the defibrillation. So essentially, if somebody collapses next to a defibrillator or CPR is ongoing, there is a good chance that they will survive. But I just need to stress that these two are integrally linked. We need to get more defibrillators out there. We need to get them closer to people who are going to be collapsing. But we also need to be ensuring that CPR is ongoing in the meantime. And we know that it works. There's a lot of evidence out there that shows that certainly just bystander CPR on its own can really improve things by an outcome of factors of 2.4, as you see on the slide there. Bizarrely, we know that you're more likely to get bystander CPR if you're in an area that has got lower socioeconomic status for some reason. So we need to boost teaching of CPR, and in particular in higher socioeconomic areas where it's less likely to happen at the moment. But this is a key factor. In combination with AED usage, survival can double. And we know from other countries that survival to hospital discharge of people who've had a sudden cardiac arrest can reach as high as 53%. And compare that with the numbers I was talking about earlier in the UK of 10%. So this is something where there is an evidence base that it can work. It isn't aspirational, it is evidence-based. I mentioned about the international examples. The graph at the top shows the average bystander CPR rates in various different countries, with England at the top of the pile there. The graph below there shows the survival rates in cases of people who've had a cardiac arrest due to an electrical problem that's amenable to defibrillation. And you can see straight away that there's a correlation. Those at the top are England, where the bystander CPR rates at the moment are probably about 30%. Whereas you look at places like Stavanger and Seattle, where the bystander CPR rates are far, far larger. And these are places as well that we know have got good access to AEDs. And you look at the survival rates on the bottom graph, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. We need to be training people up. We need to be training people in CPR and AED usage. It is evidence-based. So I'd like to move on now just to give you a little bit of an idea as to what an AED actually is, because we're more and more hearing this term being used, and people need to know really what an AED is and really dispel some of the myths that come with them. So in simple terms, an AED is an automated external defibrillator. It's a box which will come in various different shapes and sizes according to the different manufacturers, but they generally look the same. They're a simple box with a set of leads that come out of them. And the purpose of this is effectively to jumpstart the heart with an electric shock. As I mentioned earlier, The cases that we'll be most successful with are the people who've had a sudden cardiac arrest due to an electrical problem in the heart. And effectively, these AEDs jumpstart the heart and can be used with no prior training at all and can effectively save a life. So they cannot do any harm. One of the big myths that has been sort of purported with AEDs is that you could potentially do harm, and I just want to dispel that straight away. The software and the technology with AEDs nowadays are so sophisticated that it is impossible to deliver a shock to somebody who doesn't need one. So there should never be any fear that you're going to cause more harm. If somebody has had a sudden cardiac arrest, they're effectively dead. You cannot do any further harm. If somebody is not in cardiac arrest and doesn't have a heart rhythm that needs this treatment, you will not be able to deliver a shock. So they're very safe to use. We know for a fact there's evidence that people who have never even seen an AED before can use them effectively. They're very simple to use and no training is needed. However, we believe that training, certainly at school, and heightening the awareness of AEDs will make it more likely that people are going to use them. And effectively, as it says on the slide there, you can save a life with the press of one button. It's as simple as that. Schools are great places for AEDs to be located. We've all heard about high-profile cases of children who've had a sudden cardiac arrest at school. And it does happen, and it's an absolute tragedy when it happens. It's a very emotive event. We don't like to see unnecessary death in children. The evidence actually states that the people who have cardiac arrests in schools are actually more likely to be adults. So the number of adults having cardiac arrests in schools far outweighs the number of children, but it doesn't tend to get the same amount of publicity. But as I mentioned before, this is not a discriminatory condition, and it doesn't matter whether it's a child or an adult. We still need to be able to do something about it. And there's an extra dimension that needs to be taken into account as well. The surrounding community should also be able to benefit. So if somebody in the surrounding community has a sudden cardiac arrest and people know that an AED is present in the school, then there should be that access to the AED so that it can serve the local community and not just the school itself. And a great example of when an AED has been successful comes here. This picture here shows two members of school staff. On the right-hand side is Linda Duval, and on the left-hand side is the school nurse Heather Melhus. And they both work at the International School of Stavanger. And the gentleman in the centre was a visitor to the school when he collapsed. And between them, Linda and Heather used the AED that they purchased for their school. And with one push of the button, they saved this gentleman's life. Obviously, you can see how happy he is, quite rightly so. So the investment that they put into having a defibrillator and necessary training in the school has been paid back straight away. This is a man who still has a lot of life to live and is going to live that life because they invested in this. And that's a fantastic legacy for that school. So what does it actually look like when you've got an AED and a patient next to them? This is a graphic example of somebody attaching a collapsed victim to a defibrillator. It's very, very simple, and as I've already mentioned, the AED will actually tell you what to do. It will have graphic instructions on it, but it also has an audio system where it will tell you what to do. There is a symbol which is usually associated with AEDs, and this actually varies from country to country in terms of colour, but generally speaking, the international symbol for an AED is a heart with a bolt of lightning through the centre of it, and sometimes we'll have the word AED underneath. And those of you who have travelled through airports and through public transport stations may well have seen AEDs. And we want to see more of these around with visible symbols so people know where they are. As I mentioned, AEDs generally tend to be of the same sort of appearance, and this is just one example. And you'll see that they're very simple in nature, a box with leads coming out of them. And then they usually have a 1, 2, 3 approach to how they can be used. Number 1, the on button. This is the button that switches the AED on and enables it to be used. Then usually, number 2 is the instructions as to how they should be used. So there will usually be a graphic as to where to put the pads on the chest. It doesn't have to be exactly as shown here, but usually there's one pad just underneath the right collarbone and the left pad just underneath the left nipple area. And there will usually be a voice that will tell you as well what you should be doing. And then the AED will instruct you to stand clear, and it will analyze the cardiac rhythm. And if it feels that a shock needs to be delivered, it will then flash a light on the defibrillator button, and it will tell you to press the button to deliver a shock. And then hopefully this means that you have been a lifesaver. So I'd like to move on to why we should be teaching children. We do need to get public awareness of AEDs a lot better, but why children? Why are we teaching them? Well, it's quite simple, really. We want to empower individuals. We want to enthuse them, encourage the confidence and the belief that they can do something about basic medical emergencies. And we want to teach them skills that they will have for life. Adults generally have got learnt behaviour that's fixed and relatively inflexible. All of us who are adults will remember that as children we learned how to ride a bike, we learned how to play a musical instrument. As adults we would struggle to do those sort of tasks to the same level of expertise. Children are like sponges. They soak up new information. They love things like this. We've had feedback from children when we've done surveys that say that this is the sort of thing they want to learn. They see it on the television. There's numerous medical programs on the television where defibrillators are used quite regularly. So it's not a concept they are unfamiliar with. And hands-on skills like this are things that they want to learn. And it's got a bit of a three-pronged approach. We instill the correct behaviour in children. They will hopefully then go away and encourage their relatives and friends. And we've seen great examples of that with some of the resuscitation kits that can be taken home. The Norwegian experience is that resuscitation kits that can be taken home have a multiplier effect, so that not just the child taking the kit home learns, but their family members as well. And then the third prong is that hopefully they will grow up to be adults with the right sort of learnt behaviour that they can then teach their own children. So, yes, children are a captive audience. We can train a lot more of them, but this is a concept that isn't rocket science. We want them to be able to improve the recognition of medical emergencies. They will often be around, and they can hopefully improve the speed and accuracy of the contact with emergency services. And the bottom line is that we want to increase the rates of bystander CPR and AED usage. We want to have survival rates similar to Stavanger and Seattle. So what's the current situation in England? Well, the legislation in England says that emergency life support training is a non-mandatory component of a non-statutory part of the curriculum. It's currently the last bullet point in the PSHE curriculum. And that's good that it's on the curriculum, but the fact that it is not mandatory and optional for schools, we know that only 14% of children are currently being taught any sort of life support skills in schools as a result of local choice. Obviously this varies from country to country. These are the statistics that we know for England, and we need to improve this. At the moment our government is resistant to any top-down change, but we're trying to encourage them to place AED and life support training onto the school curriculum. And it doesn't really matter where it is. It could be part of citizenship, as PE, as part of science, as part of biology. There are numerous different areas that it could be a part of. Citizenship is an excellent example. It would be huge benefit both to children but also to the local communities. And we're continuing to lobby the government for that. And there's equal campaigns going on in the other parts of the UK. And I know that there are campaigns in the rest of the world to various countries. But we do have a little glimmer of hope in the UK, in that whilst the Department of Education is currently being resistant to any change, the Department of Health recently published a cardiovascular disease outcome strategy. As you can see there, one of their actions was that the NHS Commissioning Board, now known as NHS England, will work with the Resuscitation Council, the British Heart Foundation and others to promote AED site mapping and registration, first responder programs, and consider ways of increasing the numbers trained for CPR and using AEDs. And this is really welcome. Yes, we want to know where AEDs are. So if you do have an AED in your school, we need to know where that is. The ambulance services need to know. So that if somebody collapses, hopefully then they'll ring for an ambulance, and then the ambulance dispatcher will tell them how to do CPR, but also tell them how to find their nearest AED. So there is some positivity here, and the Resuscitation Council and British Heart Foundation are working with NHS England on this aspect at the moment. So watch that space. Further afield, last year, there was a successful written declaration passed by the European Parliament, which called for implementation of AED in public places and training lay people in all member states. And this is ongoing work. And this year, on October the 16th, is the very first European Restart a Heart Day. And there will be events all throughout Europe to commemorate this. And certainly we have some very exciting events planned for the UK to help celebrate the Restart a Heart Day. So hopefully that convinces you of the importance of why we need to do this and why we should be teaching children. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to talk about how to actually implement a program. I mentioned before the 1, 2, 3 approach. So the first aspect of this approach is to activate interest. You need to engage with key individuals. Obviously, schools have got so many priorities on what they need to be doing and what they need to be delivering. There are curriculum demands and various other demands, and this needs to be high up on the priority of the various schools. It's a popular topic. As I've already mentioned, a survey by the British Heart Foundation showed that teachers, children and parents all want it to be taught to all children. My local experience is that I work, as I say, in the Calderdale area, which is Halifax in the north of England. And I found that when I contacted all the secondary schools in my area, there was a lot of enthusiasm. But I needed individuals to take this forward. So, yes, we need the support of the head teachers and the principals, but this is where staff enthusiasts can make a huge difference. If there is an advocate within the school who wants to deliver this training, then usually it will happen. Even better is to enthuse people on a regional level. My own experience was I went directly to the Director of Public Health for my area and also to the head of the Education Board and got them on board. And they have helped to promote to all the schools in my area that this is something important and something that needs to be done. And as I'll mention shortly, this can also help when it comes to funding. So I've mentioned about the Calderdale example. Calderdale is a small region in West Yorkshire, which effectively is in the middle of the north of England. We're directly halfway between Leeds and Manchester. And we've been doing a project over the last year where we've approached all of the secondary schools within our area. And as I mentioned, we also had the support of the local education board and Director of Public Health. We did a semi-structured interview in all of these schools to ask whether they're delivering any training or not. And if they are, how they're delivering it and if it's sustainable. and if not, whether they want to or whether they're not interested. And most importantly, we ask them what their barriers are to training. And these are the results that we found. Interestingly, the biggest barrier to training is resource. There was a lot of enthusiasm in schools to deliver training, but a concern that they didn't have the right sort of resource to invest in equipment. And this is what I'll come on to very shortly. There was also concern about lack of training. So to address that, we have run a couple of Train the Trainers days, where we've got teachers from the various schools to come along to the hospital, where we've taught them basic life support, AED, and how to deliver the training. There was also a concern about difficulties initiating programs, and this was purely a lack of awareness as to what the resources are that are out there to deliver training. The important thing that we found is that one size does not fit all. We found that one way of delivering training in one school didn't actually fit with the way that other schools wanted to deliver training. So this is something where local choice does come into it, because there are different ways that this sort of training can be delivered. And this is a lovely picture of our first ever training day. And the two ladies at the front are Catherine Barton and Heather Yoxall, who I was very grateful to. They're both fourth-year medical students from the University of Leeds, and they took this on as a project to help deliver training in all the schools in the Calderdale area. And you can see all the various happy teachers surrounded by mannequins that we were able to donate to the various different schools. So this can happen, and it's relatively easy, but it does need to have enthusiasts in all the various different schools. One of the things that will probably be of most interest is how to actually get the funding to deliver this, and you do need to engage with sponsors. First of all, obviously, you need to secure the equipment. Now, securing the equipment it can be costly, but it doesn't have to be costly. The figure at the top there is based upon the average figure that the British Heart Foundation used to set up a school with their Heart Start programme. And that figure of £2,200 includes the package of resources and materials, so that includes course outlines, lesson plans, activity cards, promotional resources, up to 15 mannequins per scheme, the consumables such as mannequin wipes and airways, but also funding to cover the teacher supply costs to cover classes whilst the usual teachers are attending the instructor course. So this is one particular scheme and an evidence of the funding that comes with that. It's important to note that doesn't cover the cost of an AED. Now, there are obviously other organisations as well as the British Heart Foundation who can deliver training. There are the other major charities. There are the other voluntary ambulance societies. There are also private institutions, private first aid companies who deliver training. And you can actually reduce down the cost from that 2,200. And there are various ways of doing this. You may not need 15 mannequins for a scheme. You may not need as much in the way of the resources. And there are ways to get around having to have teacher supply cover costs as well. The defibrillators themselves vary in cost, from cost price to various institutions who will deliver less than cost price, and there are numerous charities out there who will actually donate defibrillators to schools. What are the other aspects you can think of? There's fundraising. One of the things that was suggested by my local schools was that if it cost £1,000, for example, to get an AED, then if there were 500 children in the school, you could have a non-uniform day where they all bring £2 to school to not wear a uniform. Instantly, you've got the money. Obviously, there's various other ways of fundraising, but this is a very good cause. And I just want to add that £1,000 was not the average price for a defibrillator. I'm aware that they can be cheaper, they can be more expensive. I mentioned earlier about local government. I was very fortunate that when I approached my Director of Public Health, I said to him, I'd like to have £5,000 to set up training in all the schools in the Calderdale area. That will pay for enough mannequins for doing the CPR training around the region. And they were able to supply that. So pulling on the heartstrings of local government, directors of public health, and also on the local education boards may well help. And as I've already mentioned, charities are also there to help as well. Finally, you've activated the interest, you've engaged with sponsors, you now need to deliver the training. We get asked quite a bit at what age education should be started. As early as possible is the best way, to be honest. Primary school level is a good age to start teaching about the background information, about emergency recognition, about how to dial for 999, 111, whichever the emergency number is in your country, and the underpinning theory and knowledge. In order to do physically chest compressions, then children usually have to be about 13 to 14 years old before they're mature enough to be able to do that sort of chest compression. And this sort of age is also a great age to introduce the concept of AED usage. It is mainly cognitive knowledge. There's minimal skill involved with AED usage, so it's something that can be used in parallel with the CPR lessons. It's not essential to actually have an AED to deliver the training. So whilst I would obviously advocate that you have AEDs in your schools, if you don't have an AED in your school, do not let that stop you from training children. Just simply a picture like the ones I've been showing can give that awareness. And a lot of the time AEDs are not used because people lack awareness. So if every child is taught about an AED and what to look for, then they're more likely to use it. As mentioned before, we know that people can actually use them without any prior training at all. But if they don't know about them, then they won't know to look for them. But the gold standard is actually to have an AED to show pupils. And as mentioned, it can link in with many different aspects of the school curriculum. It's the equivalent, teaching a year group, it's equivalent of one PE lesson a year. How long should the sessions be? It can vary. It depends on how much you want to teach. And simple CPR lessons can start at as minimum 20 to 30 minutes. AED awareness doesn't need to take long. The more you put into it, the longer it will take. It can be self-directed, it can be instructor-led. And as I mentioned, it's the equivalent of one PE lesson out of a school year. The frequency of training, well, one-off should be a minimum, but ideally annual refresher sessions thereafterwards. What other ways can we drive up awareness and ways of teaching about AEDs? I just want to briefly mention about a program that has been developed by the Resuscitation Council called Lifesaver. And I just want to stress up front that this is a not-for-profit program. The Resuscitation Council has invested money to develop this, but gets no money at all when people use it. It's free to all users. It's available from this web link, but also for smartphones and tablets via the Android and the Apple stores. And what is it? It's an interactive film which enables people to engage with real-life events and hopefully save a life by making the correct decisions. There are 3 scenarios that take people through how to manage somebody who's collapsed. And as part of this, people can also get basic first aid instruction as part of the program as well. It gives people choices, and if they make the wrong choices, then things don't turn out as well for the patient. But importantly, the scenarios include the use of an AED. So this simple, free-to-use product can actually help drive up awareness of AEDs. And at the end of it, it gives people an outcome as to how they've done. We would like to see as many people using this app, using this online tool, because it will drive up awareness and show really how relevant an AED actually is and how it can actually save a life. So finally, on how it can be taught. Who should be teaching this? Well, there's a variety of different people who could teach AEDs and CPR. Health professionals and charities obviously deliver training, but also members of staff who are already first aid trainers. And we know that teachers are equivalent to emergency service physicians in their ability to deliver this training, primarily because as teachers, you know how to teach students. You know how to teach children. You've got the superior educational training, and you're trusted already by the students. So this is something that it's easy to learn how to teach first aid, and hopefully in the future, first aid training will be part of teacher training as well. But one example I would like to just dwell upon briefly is the example of one of my local schools, which is Sowerby Bridge High School. They have actually decided to utilise their sixth formers to help train. So they've trained up a group of sixth formers, and then alongside them, they've delivered the training to the rest of the school. And this is a phenomenal way to deliver training, and it helps to reduce down costs. Why is it good? Well, it helps boost the feeling of self-worth amongst the sixth formers. They do it as part of their enrichment allocation, and as such, it helps with their university applications. And as I say, the self-worth of teaching the younger pupils, they actually love it. And I met with a group of them last week, and they were just so happy to have been involved with this. It also means that the younger students learn and hopefully look forward to teaching it themselves when they become sixth formers. But also, it means that not as much teaching cover is needed to help deliver the training. So the sixth formers become part of the faculty to teach, meaning that the number of teachers needed to take time off from other things is reduced. And this is an excellent approach to training that is sustainable as well, which I would advocate to all schools. It is important. Back in 2008, British Heart Foundation did a survey, and they found that 1 in 5 schools that were registered with them reported that they had used ELS skills in a real-life situation. So this is how important this topic actually is. So in conclusion, how to implement an AED program in your school. It's as easy as 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, you need to activate interest. You need an advocate to drive this in your schools. Hopefully that advocate will be you. Number 2, you need to engage with sponsors. Money and equipment is relatively easy to find. You need to get the right sources, and if you can't find any sources, then fundraising is a very good way of getting the equipment, because once you've got the equipment, the ongoing costs are very minimal. And finally, number 3, deliver training. Get on and do it. The enthusiasm of students is a wonderful reward. And the first time that you become aware of a life being saved, that's worth more than anything else. That will justify all of the effort in setting it up. You can make a difference today. Become that lifesaver. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. A very impressive presentation. I think you made a quite compelling case to start an AED education program in school. At that time, before we go on to the Q&A session, and you can still log in to put some more questions, it's time for our second poll. And therefore, we wanted to know if this presentation helped clarify the question you may have, whether you were already well informed, whether this presentation helped answer the questions you had, or whether you still need some more information to make a decision. Please choose your answer, and you can submit your answers now. And as last time, I will ask Laura, when she has the answers, to show them on the screen. Okay, well, I think here we are. 70% of you think that this presentation helped clarify the additional questions you may have, so that's another big thank you to Andy. Now it's time for the Q&A session. There's a few questions. A few of them may be answered afterwards. So here's one. Some of them have been already answered during the presentation. Andy, you mentioned and you made it quite clear that there is absolutely no risk. The AED cannot do any harm. If unfortunately the patient remains dead, what is your take on the liability issues? Sometimes we have this coming up.
There have been, to my knowledge, no liabilities associated with people who have attempted to use an AED. As mentioned before, people will collapse for many different reasons. The AED is of great use for somebody who has had a sudden cardiac arrest due to an electrical problem with the heart. There are other causes of the heart stopping as well as electrical problems, and the AED will not work with them. And as mentioned before, it will not make things worse. So there will be some people where an AED will not work, and there is no liability because you have tried your best to do something about the type of cardiac arrest that is amenable to treatment. So I'm not aware of anybody who has been sued because they've used an AED and the patient has still not survived.
Thank you. Another question. Can modern adult pads be used on children if the AED doesn't have any specific infant pads? What's the medical society there?
Yes, they can. The position may need to be altered. Obviously, in the very small child, they don't tend to have electrical problems in the very, very small child, but you can actually use the pads from the front and the back of the chest if they are too large to actually use. And again, if somebody has had a cardiac arrest where they're just unresponsive, what I would always advocate is get CPR started, ring the emergency services, and yes, if you've got the AED, you can put it on. It will not allow you to use it if it's not indicated.
Okay, thank you. Another one, in fact, the last one so far. We talked about AEDs in schools. You mentioned public places and so forth. Do you think that AEDs in private homes should also be recommended?
There is a strong argument for AEDs in private homes in people who are in high-risk situations. So if there is somebody who is at high risk of having a type of cardiac arrest, and there are certain genetic and inherited conditions that run in families, so if there is a high risk in a family of any conditions that may cause cardiac arrest, generally these people, once identified, have fitted what we call an implantable defibrillator, which is a very small device which will actually be implanted into the patient themselves. But in the meantime, yes, there is an argument for AEDs in private homes. But generally speaking, for each AED, the more people that are aware of where it is and how it can be accessed, the better, because that's the way that will improve survival in the population as a whole.
Okay. And I'll take just one more question. Again, we can answer the others afterwards. What if I don't do CPR well? Will it still help?
Any CPR is better than no CPR at all. No CPR, as I've mentioned before, there's a very rapid deterioration in people. But any CPR is better than nothing at all. And that was really the main thrust in the UK behind the Vinnie Jones advert that the British Heart Foundation promoted. It caused a little bit of controversy with people who were worried about the message, but the message was very simple. We would rather people do chest compressions only rather than nothing at all. The gold standard with CPR is chest compressions and ventilations, and in particular in people who've been in a drowning situation or children, then ventilations are vital. But if you're in a situation where you can't or are reluctant to do mouth-to-mouth, do chest compressions only rather than nothing at all. And that may well buy the patient enough time until the defibrillator arrives. And wouldn't it be lovely if every single child in this country every year got taught how to do CPR and got taught how to use an AED? If we can invest in the future, and this is very selfish on my part, I'm training all the people in my local area in the hope that in 10 years' time, if they find me slumped by the side of the road, they'll know how to do the right thing. And if we can get all the children to learn this, then we'll be investing in the future, and the future will be very, very good for those people who would otherwise be dead. The Fabrice Mwambas of this world will still be living, and that will be good. So hopefully everybody who's been listening to this webinar can help us, not just in this country, but in the countries that they're sat in, to lobby their governments to make sure that this training is delivered to every single child.
Well, thank you. I think I'll leave your last words to resonate within our audience. This is indeed the end of our webinar. Thank you to all of you participants. A big, big thank you to our speaker, Andy Lockie. And a big thank you to our supplier, Arcadin, and our assistant, Laura, for helping make this webinar a success. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening. Good night for some of you. Thank you, and bye-bye.